So good morning, everybody. It is definitely fall outside, isn't it? So we have a guest with us today who's going to spend about 30 minutes or so with you, talking about nationally competitive programs. Dr. David Skelton. He is your title director or assistant director? I can't remember.
Assistant director.
Assistant director. But he's actually the person in charge of all this stuff in the office. One thing that I will say before he starts speaking, we're very proud at USM of the awards that students have been able to win over the years in nationally competitive programs. And in many areas, we lead the state. And in some areas, we do better than Ole Miss and state combined. We're very proud of that. We hire great people like Dr. Skelton to come in and help us with that. It is a village kind of approach. You are not left alone to navigate these waters on your own. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Skelton. He's going to talk to you for a little bit, and then I want each and every one of you to think about questions that you may have, because these types of awards are those types of things that you want to see on that resume that we worked on earlier on, right? These are the types of things that can set you apart from your applications to medical school, law school, dental school, or employment. So these are very, very important things. And so, Dr. Skelton, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. So nationally competitive programs is kind of a umbrella term, but for the most part, what it encompasses is what in the kind of advising scholarship fellowship world that we tend to refer to as fellowships rather than scholarships. Does anybody know the difference between the two, or just want to take a stab at it? When you think about a scholarship, what do you think about? Money? Okay, that's something, obviously. Okay, the scholarships give you money. Is it money that you can just like put in your bank account, or is it a little bit more complicated?
It goes to the school.
Yeah, usually goes to school, oftentimes to cover various things like what, tuition or books or program fees or something like that. And how do you get a scholarship?
Merit,
Usually based upon merit. And what do we mean by that?
usually grades.
Usually grades, and particularly if you're trying to gain admittance to the university, what else are people looking at besides your grades?
Activities.
Activities, okay. So one more thing. Something that you work on lots of times, like your junior, senior year. It's too early in the morning to think, huh? Test scores. People look at test scores, and depending upon the university, it depends upon if it prioritizes ACT or the SAT, and then now we're taking super score, which does any of y'all know what that refers to? Super jealous of that, because when I was an undergrad, I also took the ACT several times, and there was one time where I did like really well in my math, and one time I did really well in my English, but never both at the same time, and so I had to just go with my best average. So when I think of fellowships, though, what differentiates things like the Schwartzman or the Mitchell, the Marshall organization, or the Truman or Goldwater is that this isn't coming from the university. So often scholarships are money and opportunities and things that you get from the university itself. You're applying for them from the university. The way that that's done here is through Go. So you probably heard ad nauseum as you were applying, log on to Go and do your Go application and all those opportunities. That's scholarships. Fellowships are from outside organizations, and on the Nationally Competitive Program website, we have them, which I believe is just, I meant to bring my brochure, and I completely left my office without my pamphlets or brochures to bring to y'all. But it should just be usm.edu/NCP, short for Nationally Competitive Programs. We do a pretty decent job breaking them down in terms of like if you're a freshman, what can you apply for? If you're a sophomore, so on and so forth. And then there are also things that people apply. I know this is like way ahead of the game, but things that people apply for in graduate school themselves. And so it's not like a only 1 year focused throughout your entire time, your entire collegiate career, however long or short that may be. If my youngest child, he wants it to be shorter. He's already like, you mean I have to go to school past 18? Like, well, you don't have to, but like, and then mommy always says, well, daddy went to school, and daddy's still in school, so you can just live at school. And then that is always like the look of my youngest child is the one for it. So however long or short that is for you. But for fellowships, they're outside organizations. That's the big thing. They're outside organizations. Now, what are they giving you? Money is often what they're giving you. But they're also trying to give you opportunities and a network and a community. I myself am a Fulbrighter. I applied for Fulbright in grad school, and I still get emails all the time from the Fulbright community, job listings from the Fulbright community. There are like mixers and stuff you can go to depending on what city you live in, or virtual Zoom mixers like in the last year. So there's a whole network that's there as well. So let me catch up to myself. So who am I? As Dr. Masterson mentioned, I'm Dr. David Skelton. I got my PhD in religious studies from FSU. I also am a Fulbright alum, and I applied for my Fulbright while I was in grad school at FSU, Florida State. And Florida State is often known as a party school, so I was often, first of all, when I was in your shoes, I had no idea what any of these things were. No clue what a Fulbright was, no clue what a Gilman, Goldwater, any of that stuff. I had no clue. And when I did finally have a clue and had a professor who kept on bugging me about it, like, you should apply for this, you should really think about this, I just kept on thinking to myself, well, yeah, we're Florida State though. I'm like, we've got Jameis Winston who just stole some crab legs from a grocery store and, trying to get out of that mess to see if he can play the national title. Like, that's what we're known in the news for. We're not known we're not Harvard, we're not Yale. Like, why would they care about me? But the truth is that a lot of these, yes, are you going to have more students that crank out these things at some of the Ivy League schools? Sure. But they're often not very good quality when you sit on some of these panels and read through them. And they also don't produce as much as you think. And so, as Dr. Masterson was saying, the Goldwater is a really good example that USM is really good at cranking out Goldwaters, which is the most prestigious undergraduate fellowship in sciences, in STEM. Not just in sciences, but also in STEM in general. Oh, and I worked at Pepperdine and at UNCC, both as a professor and helping students win these awards. So as I was talking about, these come from external organizations. And while, yes, there is some merit in that, they're going to ask you to come up with some sort of resume or some sort of curriculum vitae, which I had no idea, again, when I was in your shoes, what that even was and how that differentiated from a resume. It's usually a little bit longer and more academic focused than it is career focused. But they also really care about what are your goals, what's your dream, what's your vision, what do you want to do. For some of these organizations, it's about helping you pay for graduate school. So like the Truman is helping you pay for graduate school, and they're looking for change agents in the world. And so, and then you have to try to peel back the onion. What do they mean by change agents? And oftentimes that's leadership, opportunities and experiences that you have on campus. And so I forget who said activities, but that's really like the activities in the community. And what are you doing just outside of just being in the lab is really important for that. But they want to see you connect that to then what am I going to do in the community. So a person who was in your shoes very recently, who's now applying for an NSF fellowship, one of the things that he talked about was what he did outside of the classroom to help other students excel in STEM, to get comfortable with the laboratory, going to his high school and other areas to talk to them about STEM and trying to give back, but give back very kind of STEM focused. And then, like, do you want to teach? Do you want to work in the industry? You can say, I want to change the world, but you have to really focus, because everybody says that in some of these fellowships. So you have to really focus about, okay, what's the main problem that you really want to address? But you're trying to align your goal with the goal of the organization. And that's what I try to help you figure out is, okay, based upon your future goals, your future plans, your hopes and your dreams, how do you articulate that? Particularly if you only have like 3 pages, sometimes 2 pages, maybe 5, to articulate that. And how do you articulate that in such a way that an outside organization says, oh, that person is pretty compelling, and I think we should invest in them. And so an analogy, maybe it's a bad analogy, but an analogy that I use to differentiate scholarships and fellowships is thinking about football for a second. And here I'm talking about American football. I'm not talking about foosball. So when you get a college player, it's based upon like the scholarship. The college player, they threw so many touchdown passes in high school. They looked great on film, so we want them to come here, and they're going to get their tuition waived, and they're going to help us win championships now. Fellowships are more like the NFL draft. Yeah, you've done some great things, but we don't care as much about what you did. We care about where you can take our organization. So yeah, you threw all those touchdown passes at USM, and you led USM to a championship. One can dream, right? But now the Buffalo Bills are drafting you. I don't know why I picked Buffalo, because Josh Allen's going to be there for a while. But Jacksonville's always drafting. Jacksonville's drafting you because they want you to be the face of their franchise, and they want you to be someone the organization commits to, and they're committing in that person's future. They're looking at their past, but they are committing to their future. And that's what, in my mind at least, analogy-wise, and I'm thinking of fellowships, I use the NFL draft as kind of a good example. And they're not just monetary focused, they're focusing on the community, they're focusing on experiences, internships. Some of these, like some of the science awards for like the Department of Defense, for example, some of these will have job opportunities afterwards. So it's not just money. Like, yes, that's a big part of it, but there's a lot more. So what is the benefit for students? Well, we were already talking about resumes, and I've heard a story recently of a colleague who had one of these awards and also has some study abroad experience, and that the boss that he was interviewing for also had a study abroad experience in the same country, and then that led to like the entire conversation, and really first helped him feel comfortable applying for the job, and then he and the boss really hit it off, and then he ended up getting an offer because they saw like themselves as being connected, even though they never met before, because they were part of these organizations. Also, they help creating a profile for yourself, so whether it be a resume for future employment, whether it be a graduate school application where you're trying to say, okay, I know you have 5 great candidates, but you only have 3 spots, so why would they pick me over this other person? Having something like a research experience for undergrad, fellowship, or on your application, or a Goldwater on your application really helps you stand out. To steal a line from Socrates, like know thyself, which Socrates stole from the Oracle of Delphi, so we're just all stealing from other people. Learning yourself, yeah, it seems kind of cliche, but there is a really, it does happen when you are forced. I hated writing the biographical essays that many of these fellowships want. I'll write about our research all day long, I'll write about the project that you want me to do all day long, but the introspective part of, what do I want to do? Where do I come from? And how does that connect with what I want to do? And how do I convince other people that it's a compelling story? That was really hard. But so many interviews, so many graduate school applications, like that's what they want to get into. They can look at your CV or look at your resume and know, like, okay, they worked here, they did this. They want to know, hear you talk about what that meant to you and how that affects your desire for the future and your desire for change, and that's really hard, but all of these fellowships require that. And so you kind of gain that introspective skill set, in a sense. We had talked about building connections and experiences, and also, at the end of the day, lots of people, sorry to keep pointing to you. Well, what's your name?
What?
Yes.
Caitlin.
Caitlin, sorry to keep pointing to Caitlin, but Caitlin brought up money. We all need it to survive, right? And to pay for graduate school, to pay for different opportunities. No, I don't know how many people have free rides. And so, we all are looking for ways to get out of college with less debt, right? So a lot of these fellowships help you in that regard. So what are they looking for candidates? Yes, merit. We talked about merit. In the back there, what's your name?
Megan.
Megan mentioned merit. Yes, they are looking for GPAs and how you're doing in the classroom, but they're not just looking for, did you nail out of the park in your chemistry test? They're also looking at research experiences that you are doing with your professor. Are you working with the undergraduate research center here on research projects? And so the academic profile they're looking at is more than just GPA. The other thing, though, that all of these fellowships really care about is leadership potential. They might say it in different ways, but what they are really referring to is how are you contributing to the community. Now, that community does not have to be I work in a soup kitchen, although that can be the case. The community can also be what are you doing with USM more broadly. It can also be your field itself. I'm working for different organizations in the sciences. I'm trying to get other people excited about science. I'm tutoring people about science. So it can be, your community can be more STEM focused. But doing things outside of just caring about yourself and your GPA is, all of these organizations are looking for that. And what I mean by time and fit, some of these is just as basic as, well, I'm a freshman and I can't apply for that yet, or I'm a sophomore and I can't apply for that yet. But some of this may be the fact that different organizations have different statements of purposes about like what they're looking for, where they're getting their money from, because it goes back to money. Caitlin, sorry, that they're getting their money from, someone that might be deceased or a trust or something like that, and so those things have things that they're looking for, and so your future goals, your desires, your experiences might match better with one organization over another. As you're writing your essays and you're trying to build a case for yourself, you might say that, well, this organization over here, I don't know if I really fit with what they are trying to accomplish, but this one over here looks a little bit better. And so that's what I mean by that. So for STEM, I've handpicked a couple of awards that I thought would go really well, particularly on, here I'm focusing particularly on undergraduates. And the one that we mentioned a few times already is the Goldwater. The Goldwater is like the baby of USM and of STEM, because USM has historically done really well on this. USM students are they're great candidates for this award, partly because USM gets you in the lab and gets you hands-on experiences and gets you research like early on in your career, whereas a bigger university that might be, where this class might be taught by a graduate student and not by a professor, and there might be 100 people in the classroom, they might not let you touch any equipment, might not let you do anything until you're a lot, till you're older and more mature. And so it's harder to build your case for Goldwater when you don't have that hands-on experience of freshman, sophomore year, junior year, that you already have done a lot of research and you already have gotten a lot of experience. So a lot of these awards are graduate school focused, but not all of them. So the DAD, anytime you see this with 2 A's, it's Germany. Deutschland Akademischer Altersdienst is what it is in German. Had to bust out my German there for a second with my horrible accent. And RISE just stands for like something to do with the sciences, science engineering, I forget what the I stands for. But if you have a research idea that you want and you can connect that with like working in a German, go ahead.
Research in science and engineering.
Thank you. Did you just make that up or did you?
I made it up, but that
I think that you're right. I think that you're right about that.
Sorry.
Right. What's your name?
Morgan.
Morgan. I'm gonna listen to Morgan because I just couldn't pull that acronym out. So that makes sense. So it pays for and supports a research project in a German university. If you have a lab there that you really want to work at, or can kind of connect something that you want to do here with something over there. Now, you wouldn't just like out of the blue come up with all this. Like your professors will help you out because they have connections in these places. But Germany is really supports every year. And this is just one of the programs that DAD offers. But this is one that a lot of undergrads can take advantage of. Research experience in undergrad, the difference between the NSF REU and the regular NSF is paying for graduate school. And a very common trajectory people go on is apply for Goldwater as a sophomore or a junior, win the Goldwater, and then senior year apply for NSF. If you don't win it senior year, you can also apply for it in your first year of graduate school and try for it again. A lot of people are more successful the second time because they've kind of figured out the kinks and so on and so forth, and get funding for and that funds the rest of your graduate school. The Hollings is a 10-week internship with dealing with oceanography. The Fulbright itself, you have to be the main Fulbright. You have to have already graduated. And it pays for a year abroad, and there's 2 main types of major Fulbrights. Here I picked the Fulbright UK because it's a summer program that even freshmen can apply for, like you can apply for it now, but there are bigger Fulbrights that are out there. And the Hughes is another kind of summer research project-oriented opportunity. And then the Udall is really interesting because it kind of does 2 things. You either can focus on an environmental or sustainability issue and make a case about why this environmental research project or a community-based project is something that's important to you, and they will support you in that endeavor. Or if you are a Native American student, you can also, outside of the environmental or sustainability issue, you can talk about tribal issues that are important for your tribe. And I don't know if how much Dr. Masterson has told you about his own self, but he is what tribe are you registered with?
Sure.
The Cherokee. I thought it was the Cherokee because you kind of came from the Tahlequah area. Somewhere close to there, right? You grew up close to the Tahlequah area, if I'm correct.
I did, that's right.
Okay. This is something that's really important for him personally. So if you're looking for outside of the main awards, if you're just looking for like anything that's out there, and I want a database that I can kind of click on and say, I'm a freshman, I'm a sophomore, I'm doing arts and humanities, I'm doing chemistry. This website right here from Berkeley, this is actually on our webpage, so you don't have to write it down. You can if you want to, but you can scroll down at the bottom. I find it really helpful, but sometimes you'll get like 100 results, so that's why I didn't give you everything. And also, this search engine doesn't have like every award that's out there, because when I was looking for English the other day, they did not have the Eli Wiesel Award. That's And I know the Eli Wiesel Award for Creative Writing exists. So, it doesn't always have everything. But if you're looking for a very exhaustive list of resources, you can go here. If you want a more curated list, check out our website and our website here. And what do you do now, particularly if you think, okay, I'm a freshman, and maybe I don't want to apply for a Fulbright UK right now. Maybe I'm not thinking about it for this year, but for next year or junior year, I really want to hit the ground running. I would say, really focus on your intellectual profile, not just your GPA and doing well in your classes, but what classes are you taking, what organizations that are connected to your discipline are you involved with. All of these things people really care about. Try to build a good relationship with your professors. And here, in high school, I was always the kid that was talking to the teacher after class and chatting with the teacher after class, and you always got teased about like being a brown noser, which, trust me, that didn't always help when you still got a B in your English class or something. You just are generally interested in the subject and like talking to people. But here, it's really important because your faculty mentors are going to be the ones that are writing your recommendation letters for these fellowships. They also are going to be writing your recommendation letters for jobs. They also know about a lot of opportunities for you, and so and they're great people. So you want. I encourage brown nosing. You want to build that close relationship and talk with your faculty member outside of class. Go to their office hours. So many students are so scared to go to office hours because they think that they're like, you only go there to say, what's on the test right before the midterm? Which, as a professor, I hated that. Not because I didn't want to see the students, but because you really crave having like a real conversation with students about things that they care about. And, if all you ever do is see the student for, what's on the test, you never get that. But as a student, that also hurts you because you don't build that close relationship with a faculty member that you really need, not just to succeed in fellowships, but to succeed in a lot of areas outside of USM. Just also start thinking about your future. The plans don't have to be set in stone. You're allowed to change your mind. But, journaling about your life and things that you care about, things that bother you, and trying to kind of be more knowledgeable about what's going on in the world. I know the last thing I wanted to do was even think about that when I was a freshman. I just wanted to do all the fun stuff on campus, but thinking about some of that stuff now will help you in the future. And finally, I would love to see all of you in my office and to make an appointment with me. I'm over in Kennard, Washington. I forgot to put this on here. I'm over in Kennard, Washington in the Office of Undergraduate Scholarships. So when you first go into Kennard, admissions is on the top floor on the left. We're on the top floor on the right, and I'm like in the very back of that office. So everybody knows where I'm at, but if you are trying to find me, that's where I'm at. So any questions? Go ahead.
So I'm a junior. I've been through a couple application cycles. One problem I always run into is wanting to apply for everything, but I run out of professors to get references, and I don't want to ask the same professors to write 6 recommendations. How do you suggest I balance that? What are
Okay.
some strategies to narrow down programs? How many should I ask? Do you recommend?
Okay. I never encourage narrowing down because I think that you should apply for as many as possible. And at least one strategy to make it easier on yourself is to think about what do they have in common. So for example, when I applied for the Fulbright, I also applied for, now I was in graduate school and working with a dissertation, but I also applied for the Mellon International Dissertation Fellowship. I also applied for the DAD, not the DAD Rise, but just the DAD Research Fellowship, and a graduate fellowship that FSU was offering. And I didn't recreate the wheel each time. like your research statement was kind of your research statement. Maybe like Fulbright wanted it to be 2 pages, Dad wanted it to be 5 pages, so you kind of had to, expand it out a little bit for them. But as far as a lot of these application cycles, it's more about navigating the date than it is about like recreating new materials each time. Now, of course, you don't want to send your Fulbright application to Dad and your Dad application to Fulbright, but I think of fellowship applications as creating templates, and this is I want to go to a UK school template, and I might change Rhodes to Mitchell, and maybe there's a little bit of things here and there that I have to tweak, but you're not recreating something whole cloth. This is my more kind of laboratory-based research graduate school kind of template, but you can then use that not just for some fellowships, but also for applying for graduate school. And so, but I encourage applying for lots of things because, to use a horrible analogy, but like when you shoot a shotgun, it spreads, and you're more likely to hit things that way. Although it's anyways, you don't want to use a shotgun for certain things. I'm a horrible hunter, so I'm not going to. I'll kill that analogy. I have too many deadly analogies. I need to come up with something nicer. But the more things that you can apply for, the more chances that you'll have of getting something. And so if your ultimate goal is, I just want this funding, I just want this opportunity, I don't care who I get it from, I always encourage more. As far as like bugging your faculty members, I don't think that the faculty members necessarily see themselves as being bugged. You can correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I can comment on that. I think I have never turned away a student who had multiple applications that they needed a letter for if two things. Number one, I really knew that student. I mean, they came to office hours, we had chats, whatever. And two, that you didn't send me a need for 6 2 days before the deadline. Those are the only 2 things. I mean, faculty want to write things for people who they have gotten to know, and as long as you give them plenty of time, they do view this as part of their mission. So there is no bugging us about the number, as long as you respect our time as well in the process.
Right. I had a good conversation about this when I was applying for jobs. You still use your faculty mentors for jobs, and one of my colleagues, I told him, I just feel so bad. I don't want to bug my advisor. And he said to me that your advisor committed to you. That's why you're your advisor, and they are committing to you for life. Like that is a relationship that they're building. So never think that you're bugging somebody. Always be cognizant of time frames and time restraints. And yeah, sometimes you have to call people. And so in my case, sometimes I have to call Dr. Levins and say, Dr. Levins, remember that this is due on Sunday, and you have not submitted it yet, and I'm just reminding you. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'll get to that. And so it's not that they don't care about you. It's just that you're not the only person they're writing letters of recommendation for. They also have class to prepare for and committee work. So for them, maybe they're like, okay, I'll do these recommendation letters this Saturday and these recommendation letters that Saturday, and I just haven't gotten to yours yet. Sometimes, they forget. Faculty members are human; they forget. And so
the absent-minded professor stereotype is true.
Yeah. So you do have to bug them, and it's not bugging, but it's just it's reminding them. And if it's important enough to you, you have to learn early on, particularly if you decide to keep going in a graduate school and other awards where you need a lot of faculty recommendation letters, that you have to get rid of the I'm bugging them, what if I'm being rude? Like this is important for you, and so you just have to be persistent about it, and faculty understand that. So I don't know if that solves your problem, but I'm trying to get to the root of some of your questions and help you kind of navigate the fact that I don't think multiple applications are a big deal. You just have to strategize ways that are smart for you to not completely be creating 6 new things, but thinking about it as maybe creating 2 things that you can then adapt. And then as long as you are cognizant of time frames, that bug your faculty members away. They want you to, because they want you to succeed too.
I think we have time for one more question. Does anybody have one more question for Dr. Skelton? I know there were some questions asked during it, so that was good. All right, seeing no more questions, let's give it, oh, okay, go ahead.
Okay. I don't have a question, but I do have a comment.
Okay.
And it's very unrelated, but since no one else had questions, your mask feels very Christmas related, and it's not Halloween yet.
Oh, no. I do have a lot of Christmas themed masks. I just grabbed it because it was green. And I thought it kind of matched. But, trust me, I know all about Halloween. I have been navigating this since day one of being with my partner about, she would put up Christmas decorations in August, and I'm like, can we do this whole Halloween thing? I'm not going to be as strict about Thanksgiving, because when we lived in Germany, after Halloween, Christmas is everywhere, and it's amazing. So study abroad, go to Germany, apply for dad, because Christmas season there is awesome.
You have to know German, German to
No, I mean, everybody knows English. I mean, I tried my best, and I took some German classes, and it was helpful for me in certain situations when I had to go to the courthouse and be like, here's my birth certificate, and here's this, and I navigated some of that in German. I think they could have done it in English if I just didn't know anything, but I tried, and I think they appreciated the effort of me, knowing what my Geburtscertifikat was, and talking about some of that. But as far as if somebody, your satchel looks just like mine, so I keep on trying to grab it, and I'm like, no, my satchel's in my office. They appreciated some of that, but if somebody wanted to talk about politics and the economy, I would have no clue how to get into that conversation. But how to order food, asking questions, I try to learn some of that. People always appreciate that, as little or as much as you can gain before you go somewhere. I mean, I just think that's a good cultural thing, regardless of if you're applying for fellowships. Even if I was going to Egypt for just 2 or 3 days, I would try to learn how to say hello, how are you, thank you, just a couple of phrases. And people always appreciate that.
Okay, well, let's give Dr. Skelton a round of applause.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming. Appreciate it. So, a couple of things that I'll just mention once again. USM really does pride itself in the work that you all do in gaining these fellowships. And right now, many of you may not be thinking terribly seriously about them, because many of you are freshmen. But these are really the things that will get your foot in the door into a lot of things. It's one of the regrets I have when I was an undergraduate of not having pursued a lot of these opportunities. And not only do we have an office for nationally competitive programs, but we also have what's called the Pathways program. We have a Center for Pathway Experiences. And there is a scholarship to help you finance those types of things as well. So if you're not thinking about applying to a Goldwater or anything like that, but you want to go off and do an internship, that's another thing that I think you all should be thinking about. Obviously, we've talked about that before, and we do have an office that can help you finance that. So keep that in mind. And another thing that Dr. Skelton mentioned was that you have your advisor for life. That's essentially true. The tuition that you're paying right now isn't just for your class time. Right? You're not just paying your hour of tuition to be in this class for this 1 hour once a week, but you're paying for my time as long as you really need it. So that's something that you need to keep in mind. It's a very valuable resource, not necessarily my time, but the other professors that you have that you end up working with. So I put a few things in the canvas. And of course, there we go. The Barrie M. Goldwater Scholarship. This is one that USM has done better at than Ole Miss State, Jackson State combined. We're the leader. I truly believe this when I tell you we are the leader in the state for undergraduate STEM education. We really are. We have the Center for Undergraduate Research. I hope to be able to get somebody to come in here and talk to you about that. It is housed in the Honors College, but it is not just for honor students. It is a way for you to get money to do a research project that you choose to do. We were the first in the state to actually establish the Center for Undergraduate Research. That center was established by a previous provost, Dr. Dennis Wiesenberg, who is a marine scientist. He believed that it was something that we did well and we should celebrate that by the formation of a center. I used to be on the steering committee for that center. The funding rate, at least it used to be about 50%, so 50% of proposals got funded. Now you might be thinking that's not all that great. 50% on an assignment is an F, right? Well, in the world of funding proposals, that's actually a very high rate. I submit proposals to the National Science Foundation where the funding rate is like 15%. So you know that 85% of everything that's being submitted is just going to be rejected for funding. And so in the sciences, you have to kind of get used to being in the business of rejection. That's the way it is. The Barrie Goldwater Scholarship, again, Dr. Skelton and his office can help you navigate this, but there are certain things that unit cannot do for you. And the one is that if you're going to be competitive in a Barrie Goldwater, you have to have some research experience. So before the end of the semester, we will have some talks, probably recorded, of folks and what they do in research. Every one of you, if you remain in the biochemistry program, will have to do some research before you leave. It's part of your capstone. But if you're interested in doing a Barrie Goldwater, you really need to get involved in research earlier. And we do offer a course called Chemistry 392. I think we've talked about that before. That's introductory research, and you can get into that fairly early on. Now, every lab has its own requirements for, some people will say, I'll take you as a freshman. Other people say, well, I want to make sure you've at least got one semester of organic. So you want to get in and talk to folks about that early on. The reason that is important is you cannot be successful in a Goldwater without some level of research experience. You can't say, I'm going to do. You really have to show what you have done. It's usually a good idea if you've done research and given a presentation at a symposium. That's really good. If you have a publication, that's even better. But certainly they want to see that you've given a presentation somewhere over a research project. So we've been very successful at this, as I've mentioned before. I suggest you go through and read all of this. If you're interested, I'm more than willing to talk with you about next steps to try to help you find a research mentor. Because right now, again, this funds your junior or senior year, if you're a freshman, right now you need to be getting involved somewhere in research to where you're going to have something to write about. Okay? It's an excellent scholarship. I've had one young lady in my lab many years ago was a Barrie Goldwater scholar. Probably one of the best students USM has ever had, actually. She was excellent. She got started actually doing research with me her second semester at this institution. And the reason I ended up doing research with her is because she actually came to my office, and it was just amazing how in command she was of where she wanted to go in life. And I went, you got to pick this person up and work with them, because getting somebody with that level of enthusiasm is a rarity, and so I did. Again, most people won't just after your first semester of college, but a few will, especially if you go in and demonstrate to them that you really have the desire to do the work in the research. So anyway, I want you to go through and read this. Information on the website if you haven't already. It will be part of our reflection that will be due tomorrow. So you'll definitely want to keep up with that. Okay, the other things that I had in there were things out of the chemistry book. Yes, ma'am.
When I read this, it didn't tell us if the water was messed up or not.
Okay, that's right. It didn't, but you did. So it's good. You read about polywater, right? Is polywater real? No, it's not real. But we thought it was for a while, and by we I mean the scientific community, right? Many, many years ago now. Why is it that I gave you this to read? What's important about something that doesn't exist? What does it demonstrate to you all?
They had to keep testing it to figure out that it didn't exist.
Okay, I want a little bit more than that, but you're right. What else? What did we just talk about not long ago? Okay, that's right. We talked about hypotheses. We talked about the scientific method, right? The people who originally reported on polywater made an observation. Do you think that observation was true?
Yes.
The observation was true, right? It was just the hypothesis that they had was wrong. They saw unusual viscosity of this water, unusual boiling point of this water, and they started to form a hypothesis that, oh, this water must be forming some sort of hydrogen bond network that's polywater, right? And that seems to explain all of this. And then people started thinking, no, wait a second. Let's take a stronger look at that, right? And there was a lot of debate back and forth, right? What ultimately did they kind of determine was the most likely culprit here? Was the water pure water? No. In fact, they said that you could hardly discern it from sweat. And if you all know anything about sweat, you know it's full of electrolytes, that is salts, right? And you know that if you add salts to water, the boiling point goes up. If you add things like if you add a bunch of sugar to water, eventually it starts to look like it's getting thicker, right? That's what syrup is, right? So you start to increase viscosity. But what this demonstrates is the robustness of the scientific method. An observation was made. A hypothesis was proposed. That hypothesis seemed to be consistent with those observations. But further study and further skepticism from other scientists led to the rejection of that hypothesis. Right? There are tons of hypotheses every day that get rejected and never end up in a book. But this one is what we call a gold standard example of how the world kind of caught on fire with this idea of this fear that, oh my gosh, what happens if polywater gets loose, right? People were worried about that. Science then took a step back, calmly thought about it, performed additional testing, and was able to determine that in fact polywater, even though the scientists claimed, and I have no doubt that they were doing their best to get pure water in these little capillaries, nonetheless, it was shown that somehow contamination was occurring. And so the whole polywater saga came in with a flash and left with a flash just as well. Can anybody think of any other things in maybe more recent history, and by recent maybe 30 years or so, that might be of this type of caliber of things that really set the scientific world on fire and then turned out to not be so true? Back in the 80s, there were two chemists, Pons and Fleischmann. Anybody know about them? Anybody know about the term cold fusion? All right, think about fusion. Where is fusion? Where do we get fusion energy from? The sun, right? It's hot, right? It's massive. All that gravity, it's forcing atoms together in a way that you start to have fusion. Hydrogen atoms fuse together to form helium. Energy is released, right? And you get a sun, right? Lots of energy. right? We have energy crises on this earth all the time, right? Sometimes you go through cheap gas, other times you go through more expensive, right? There's all these things with hydrocarbons that are limited, right? But people would really like to have a way of doing fusion, because fusion, you can take essentially an infinite amount of what we have on Earth, relatively speaking, and you can fuse it together, and you could make a lot of energy. Now, I'm not a physicist, so that's about as far as it goes with me. But in the 80s, Pons and Fleischmann thought they had found cold fusion. Okay? This was one of the few times that the American Chemical Society at its national meeting actually hosted an impromptu kind of brown bag lunch to have this talk and discussion. They actually set up experiments to try to replicate the cold fusion, and it turns out it wasn't cold fusion. Okay? They were seeing some interesting phenomena, Pons and Fleischmann, but they weren't seeing cold fusion. And the first experiment really that somebody, I don't know who it was that said it, if you know anything about fusion, you know that you get neutron releases. Neutrons are very deadly things when they are set free from an atom, and they have a lot of velocity. They will enter your body, they will clip your DNA, and they will kill you. Okay? We use neutrons actually to treat some cancer. Okay, so it's very, very deadly kind of stuff. And one scientist said, well, if Pons and Fleischmann did this actually in a beaker like they demonstrate, why are they still here? If they had actually gotten cold fusion, they should have released all these secondary neutrons and they should be dead. And so there was a whole thing. I mean, it's in all the popular press. The world energy crisis is over. We've got cold fusion. And then just as quickly as it came in and science started to kind of calm down and look at it a little bit more closely, we figured out that, no, they hadn't figured out cold fusion. And it's kind of a shame in a way because they were actually very good chemists, and they got kind of caught up in what they had thought they had found. And when you let that kind of stuff out, if you're not really sure, you can really ruin your reputation really, really quickly. There was a guy at the University of Oklahoma when I was there who was also interested, who had been studying things on Alzheimer's, and he thought he had found the cure to Alzheimer's. That was kind of known internally for a little while, but he was very cautious about saying anything. 2 weeks later, he figured out, no, that was just a fluke. He couldn't reproduce that experiment, and in fact, it didn't go anywhere. That's the scientific method. The other thing, which we're not going to have a whole lot of time to talk about, is Le Chatelier's principle. This is one of the most important concepts in chemistry, and so I think what we will do is we will save this for next week. So what I need you to do is pull out a sheet of paper, print your name on it, put your ID number on it. As you walk out, just put it on the end desk there, and I will see you all next week. We will have our normal reflection due tomorrow. I'll get that up as soon as I can, but that'll be due by 5 o'clock tomorrow. So I wish you all a good rest of the week. Happy Halloween, and see you in November.